for business leaders to drive revenue through effective marketing strategy. We chat with marketing experts on different topics that will help you ramp up your revenue. We stream live on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, and you can listen to us on your favorite podcast platforms. Marketing Demystified, the podcast, is presented to you by GrowGetter, your partner in growth marketing. And here's today's episode.
Hello, everyone. Are you ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered with actionable tips to transform your marketing game? You are in the right place. Welcome to Marketing Demystified. I'm your host, Jenn Mancusi, CEO and co-founder of GrowGetter, your growth marketing partner. One really effective way to stay in front of your target buyers is through account-based marketing, also known as ABM. But how and when is the right time to start an account-based marketing strategy? To discuss this topic, I'm joined by ABM expert, Pam Didner. Welcome to the show, Pam.
Oh, hey, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. Hi, Jen.
Really happy to have you here, Pam. Thank you so much for joining today. ABM, account-based marketing, one of my favorite topics, and I'm so excited to hear from you, learn from you, your expertise on this very important subject.
Thank you. So kind of you. I mean, seriously, I would not call myself expert. It's completely overrated. Just have a lot of mistakes I learned that I'm willing to share.
Amazing. Well, maybe we can learn from some of your mistakes then, so we don't have to repeat them.
Definitely.
So let's kick off. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started doing account-based marketing?
Great question. I actually started by supporting sales. So many of my salespeople at that time, they actually handle kind of like tier one or strategic accounts. And they would like to find ways to further that relationships, if you will. And they always come up with a question like, hey, can we do marketing with them? Hey, can we partner with them to present at certain conferences? Hey, what about we can co-brand some of the content? And oh, by the way, we got some of the MDF, which is kind of the marketing development fund, which is kind of typical actually in the tech segments or the software segments. Like some of the vendors will provide MDF fund that they can actually do marketing together with their customers. So the salespeople always come to me and say, hey, can we do something together with them to further that relationship? That's how I got started in terms of ABM, which is account-based marketing.
I love that. I love that it started from sales, because I think it's so critical that sales and marketing work on a strategy like this together, because they're so tied. Like it's in the name, account-based marketing. However, like if it can't be done without cross-functional collaboration.
I 100% agree with you. I mean, you are totally right. If you think about the name, account-based marketing, the things that we really need to focus on from the marketing side, it's not necessarily the marketing that you can do. It's very much account. What are the account that you can support, right? So focus on the account, and that dial up your collaboration and also communication with the sales side. So you cannot do ABM without sales collaboration and also engagement and buy-in, right? Otherwise, there's no account-based. It's just marketing.
So the emphasis is on the account. The emphasis is not on the marketing side. The emphasis is on account. We're going to go through the rest of this conversation with that in mind. I think that's such an important place to start. And, you know, also like, your description of sort of how you got started in collaborating with sales was about like furthering the relationship with existing clients. Like, how do you think about ABM when it comes to that, the goal of furthering relationships versus the goal of, you know, selling to new clients? And how does ABM play a role in each of those audiences?
That's actually a great question. And Jen, you brought a very good point, right? And when you're working with sales, what are the things that sales care the most? Obviously, they want to get more revenue so they can get more, bonuses, right? So with that in mind, and how do you do that? On the sales side, you can cross-sales and upsales with existing accounts. So you can further relationship with existing accounts. And the other one is you can find new logos, right? New accounts that added to their list. So the ABM can be done on both ways. The one is actually what can you do cross sales and upsells, especially when you actually have the features that added to your product that you would like, say your existing customers to actually purchase them. So there's an ABM part of it that you work with your sales to target specific accounts. Then of course there's new logos that the salespeople would like to go after, and you can do ABMs on that as well. And a lot of time is what are the new logos they want to go after, and also what are their game plans. They need to have a game plans first, how they want to tackle and also go after these accounts, and what marketing can do is to complement that game plan. Is that helpful? So a lot of time, like the salespeople say, I'm doing account-based marketing. Well, tell me what to do. Well, what is your game plan? How do you want to reach out to these? How do you reach out to these accounts? And if you know that, you share your game plan, your approach with the salespeople, and then with the marketing people, and the marketing can actually provide additional idea to make sure that you can win that account.
Absolutely. I think that's like being aligned with that strategy is so critically important, and understanding the goals. And I think you really packaged it up nicely in the kind of two different ways in which sales is kind of trying to drive new revenue for the business. And there's a question in the chat here, which I think is interesting, about training sales to understand account-based strategies and account-based marketing. Yeah, I'll pitch that one to you. How do you think about training sales, or is it more collaborative than a training exercise?
That's actually a great question. And I would assuming this question is asked with assumption that the salespeople don't know what account-based marketing is. That just make that assumption very quickly for me to answer that specific question. If they don't know it, you should provide some examples in terms of what ABMs or what from the marketing side that you can do to actually help them. For example, if you do email marketing, you already run say monthly email campaigns, or you have new product features, then you have new promotions that you do a new promotion on the new features through your email marketing effort. You can customize that for account specific, right? For example, if there's a top 10 accounts that salespeople would like to reach out, and therefore let's assume it's basically for some of the engagements they have, they are not able to close the deals or whatnot, right? You think about what that email will look like. Maybe you can send a very targeted email to these people, and maybe focus on talking about the features of the product, and gently nudge them that hey, these features will help you tremendously because of blah 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 blah. Right? So that is a customized account specific type of email marketing, if you think about it. So the way I would see in terms of training salespeople, assuming they don't know what marketing can do for them, is to share some examples with them in terms of what you do and how can you customize those outreach to help the salespeople.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's super helpful. I think showing examples of how it's going to benefit them is probably a good tip for any training on any topic, right? Show and tell, right? Yeah, exactly.
Hey, Jenn, just quickly, can you hear me okay? It's the mic coming through all right, or do you hear some of the crackling?
Yes, we're having a little crackling and maybe a bit of a feedback, but we're powering through technical issues.
Let me do one quick thing.
Sure.
And if everybody can bear with me, I'm just going to change MacBook. So is it better now?
Yes, that is much better.
Okay, very good.
Amazing.
Okay. Question fixed. I mean, issue fixed.
Yes, pivoting on the fly. I love that. Thank you so much. So we touched a little bit on, some of the outcomes and of ABM, like when it comes to sales, like cross-selling, upselling, bringing in new logos, but what are some of the benefits of an account-based strategy as a whole?
Yeah, there are several benefits I would like to talk about. Number one is obviously because you do account-based marketing, so you work closely with sales. So it's nice to deepen the relationship with sales. That's number one. Okay, that's to me the biggest benefit is working with sales closely. Number two, once you're working closely with sales, then you can quantify marketing's impact as a part of sales engagement, right? If you work with them on the ABM, on some of the ABM activities that you do, you can easily see, hopefully through CIM, what is the impact of that. You can quantify in terms of your effort in the context of the opportunity generated or even sales revenue, right? Yeah. Number three is once you do all this, you have relationship with them, and now you can see your impact. The next thing is now the marketing element just nicely weave into some of the sales tactics and the sales negotiation. See how these three are tied together?
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree with you that the biggest benefit is creating a more aligned approach between sales and marketing, or customer success if you've got a CS team or an account team. Like, depends on your business, right? It might be set up differently, but that cross-functional alignment really is one of the biggest benefits to doing an account-based strategy correctly. I do know, I have heard people talk about kind of doing these things separately, targeting different accounts, and that just doesn't work. It's not going to work for anybody. And I had a question maybe in my mind for later on in this conversation, but I'm going to move it up to right now because you talked you talked about like quantifying marketing's, involvement in revenue through account-based marketing. Oh, welcome to the show.
Hello.
He's got a lot to say about account-based marketing. But in terms of like measuring success, I think that, the attribution modeling is actually quite important to have it set up properly when it comes to ABM, because how do you think about marketing's contribution to an account-based success, sales' contribution, and being able to win together and measure that win together versus, the kind of challenge of like, well, how do we know where that revenue came from if everybody's working on it? You know what I mean?
I do. So, Jen, you brought a very good point. I think in terms of quantifying the marketing's contribution or, giving marketing credit is always hard. It's always hard. And I 100% agree with you that if you do ABM, you need to make sure you have UTM code associated with the specific channel that you are doing ABM with, so you can actually track the source code in terms of where is that source coming from, right? To actually, if you're doing an email marketing, that you have a code associated with that, and that somebody click on that and then go to the contact form, that you have a trace to see where that is from. And I think attribution marketing is very, very critical in terms of showing like the marketing's contribution, or showing kind of like a breadcrumb, if you will, the digital breadcrumb that your prospects are making in this digital marketing space. A lot of people would say, well, you know what, before they even come talk to sales, and they probably have several UTMs associated with it. Sometimes it's talking to the sales directly. Sometimes you wine and dine and they're going to a specific invitation only event, or they attended the events and you scan them. I do agree with that. And then you need to make a determination if you want to count, say, the marketing's contribution. Is it the first attribution that you're going to count, or is the last attribution? And there's no right or wrong answer, as long as you make a very conscious decision how you want to count that. And if everybody agree, then that's that. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
So my take on this is attribution marketing is super important. I 100% agree with you, Jen. Given that you're doing growth marketing, I know on the digital side that part of it is super critical. The second thing is have a discussion with your team in terms of attribution and which one you want to take credit. And as long as everybody is agreed, then that's, take it from there.
I think that's the most important piece, is that there's an agreement ahead of time of what success looks like. And ideally, if you hit that first piece of like, oh, we're getting closer on collaboration and we're all on the same team working towards the same goal, then the attribution of like who quote unquote gets credit doesn't matter as much. It's like, hey, this is what it looks like when we operate as a team versus this is what it looks like when we don't. Right. And that in and of itself can be really powerful. But I love what you said about like everybody agrees this is what success looks like and how we're going to measure it beforehand.
Exactly. I mean, as long as the thing is what I have seen, that there is like fighting the credit. I should get a credit. No, I should get a credit. If there's any kind of fighting over the credit, from my perspective, there's a deeper issue you need to address. It's likely there is lack of trust or lack of communication, or the credit was taken, but really that from sales perspective, they don't think you deserve it. So you have to somehow understand what the root causes are in terms of like people are fighting over credit. Does that make sense? So once you address that in general, and everybody understand that everybody's contributing and we are working as a team together, if there's a coherent, a teamwork spirit, and what I have seen working with different clients is the credit fighting tend to be less.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And if you're experiencing that challenge internally, if you've maybe got issues beyond ABM.
Oh, completely. Completely. The relationship is complicated.
It is complicated. And I mean, it's tough, right? Like everybody wants to grow and drive revenue and everybody's trying to do their best. And I've seen cultures where kind of sales and marketing work really closely together. And that's, it just benefits everybody, right? So
100%
great way to do that. So let's back up a little bit now and think about like, if a company is not embracing an account-based strategy yet and they want to get started, how could they, what's the first step to implementing a strategy like this?
Okay, so I think the number one thing to start with is the sales feel they need some help. I always ask, marketers always come to me and say, oh, you know what, I cannot get ABM started. And my take on this is, my first question is, are they meeting quota? Are the salespeople like hitting, the quota every single quarter, every single month? If they are doing a great job on their own, maybe we don't need ABM. Okay, that should be the question you should ask yourself. Does that make sense? So don't force it. It's kind of like relationship again. That's not forcing it. Okay. So it's, if they are doing pretty well on their own, maybe we don't need to rock the boat. Just let them do whatever they are doing. Obviously, it's working. But they are not meeting quota and they try a lot of stuff and still not working very well. Obviously, they need some help. If there's a gap or being cracked and say, I need some help, and sales kind of feel that they need help, then marketing can basically say, okay, let's talk about what kind of help you will need. Then you determine if ABM makes sense. Maybe they don't even need ABM. Maybe what they need is templates. What they need is content. What they need is certain things that they can accelerate that conversion, right? So my take on this is, when people say, how can I implement ABM? My question is always, do they need it? You need to assess that first. Maybe they don't. Maybe they do. Maybe some other things that you can do even better to support them, right? So find out what that is first, and then you can determine, okay, ABM, yes or no. Then if ABM is a yes, they were like, you know what? God, I have those new logos. I just cannot close them, right? I don't know why, or they know why. Then you guys can have a conversation in terms of what kind of marketing you can do to actually gently, I don't know, accelerate that, right? It can be you do pay media. It can be that you have a invitation event. It can be that you invite them to actually to the conference that you guys will you will sponsor. So you have to figure out a specific marketing elements that you will do. Then you build a process on that. So a lot of people say, I want to do ABM. And what does ABM looks like? Well, ABM depends on what you want to do because everybody does marketing differently. Every single company. Even though we use email, everybody use email. But the way we use email, it's different. Does that make sense? Some people use it for campaigns. Some people only send out the email newsletter every week. Some people only send out the email when they have a product, new product launches. So everybody use it differently. Mm-hmm. Then because everybody does differently, you need to think through in terms of how the marketing channel is used with your company, and then think about the accounts you want to go after. Then you determine appropriate marketing tactics to reach out to them. Right. So ABM is different from company to company.
That's so important. I think this actually ties in really well with what you were saying about measuring success and agreeing as to what, how you're going to measure it, what data point is most important, or what are the metrics that are most important? What are you trying to drive? Because you're right. Like, everybody's marketing strategy is different. Tactics that work for one company will not work the same way for another company. So being really in tune with your data is the only way to know what kind of tactics you should put in place. And, when I started doing ABM, account-based strategies years ago, there was no like targeted ad serving platforms or anything like that. And it was just like a focus on accounts. And we were tracking in Excel, like how many contacts we had.
Excel, okay, Jen? Excel has not gone away.
Excel has not gone away, unfortunately, but there's better ways to track things today in terms of attribution. But there weren't really a lot of ways to get in front of these people. Right now, there's so many more ways to get in front of them, and like being able to measure that in real time or in close to real time is the best way to kind of experiment, because ABM really isn't one tactic. It's a combination of tactics that, like you said, are very unique for every business.
Yes. Therefore, the objectives are very important, right? What is the objective that you want to accomplish? Have that crystally clear articulated. Mm-hmm. And there's no confusion whatsoever between the sales and the marketing in terms of what that objective is. And from there, things will flow naturally.
Totally. Yeah. And I would say too, like oftentimes, the objective is more revenue, right? You could say that for anything. And that's really difficult to measure on a campaign or strategy or tactic level, especially if you've got longer sales cycles. So, for me, I try to think about like, what are the other metrics in between the campaign and the revenue? Like, yes, ultimately we're measuring everything against the revenue that it's generating, but what are some of those leading indicators that are the most reliable in terms of predicting revenue that you can also measure? Because that's where things kind of differ. Like, if everything is driving towards revenue, everything should be driving towards revenue, then an email campaign should be measured differently than inviting a client to a conference.
Can I add additional points to what you just said?
Yeah.
So I do agree with you that everything that you do is driving revenue, especially on growth side. Jen, you have done this day in and day out. You can attest to that. And even though the objective is driving revenue, but there's many ways to drive revenue. Right? You can build brand awareness that's indirectly driving revenue because you have more people aware of your product. You can drive demand gen, which is you have leads that you have to bring the prospect into the purchase channel. And so each marketing tactics might have a slightly different measurement. For example, if you run pay media on the broader awareness campaigns, that specific campaign metrics will be different than, say, if you do, say, you sponsor a conference. I got all that. And I do agree with you that different kind of communication channel specific metrics are important, but it's also important that you have to look at some of those metrics and see if you can bring that metrics one level down to the middle of the funnel. For example, right? You do you sponsor an event and then many people come to your booth. Great. So the metrics probably can be, you talk to 300 prospects, you scan, the business cards, and you have 300 or 400 of them. Okay, that's one measurement. But you send out the email post event, and the call to action of that email is, if you are really interested in our products, reply to this email. We will have our salespeople talk to you. And hey, just having a brief conversation and have you understand our product a little bit more. That's it. You make it very casual, right? So out of that, there's 300 or 400 people you send that email to, but only 2 people say, yes, I want to talk to the salespeople. Your metric should be 2, not 300 or 400, because that 2 has more sales impact. Is that helpful? So you have to look at your ABM effort. And when you are looking to the metrics you want to use, some of them are very broad. And the management don't care. So you have to think about how to bring that down a little bit to the point they care. And that number may not be huge. That's okay. It's the quality versus quantity. And it's your job to educate your executives. I didn't give you 300 or 400 business cards. Or you talk to people that just responded, they want to talk to sales. They want that. And of course, they will come to you and say, I want 20 of that. Well, that's a different story. That's a different story. You can talk to them, you want 20, more budget. Why? Cost per lead. You get that too by paying $20,000 a sponsorship. You can literally calculate what's the cost per lead on that one. What can you do to get more? Maybe there's things you can optimize. But in general, I hate saying this, it has a lot to do with budget too.
Yeah. That's a whole nother conversation.
I know, that's a completely different conversation. We should have another, podcast to talk about that.
We'll have another podcast.
We also need to drink a little bit,
That's an after hours conversation for sure. But I think you're totally right. Like getting down to the middle of the funnel metrics or closer to the bottom of the funnel metrics, if it's not quite at revenue yet, especially like I mentioned, like a longer sales cycle, those are the metrics that,
and that's a pretty good metrics from my perspective.
Absolutely. And I have heard people say like, oh, like, don't look at those numbers. They're not that great, but it's just data, right? It just gives you a starting place. And it's so important to look at those data points.
It doesn't matter. So the number is not great. Who cares? Right? You got 2. That's pretty good from my perspective. On any B2B sales, the purchasing cycle tend to be longer. And it's getting longer every day because buyers are sophisticated. Right? So if the number from your perspective, you are not very proud, well, educate your executives. Let them know that it's hard. It is. It is hard.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And so that's why like a targeted strategy, like we're talking about with account-based marketing, can really help narrow down, what's the value of those 2 sales conversations from your top target accounts versus those 2 sales conversations from, a broad, wide net of people, right? They're not equal to each other.
Really not. I do agree with you.
So this is why
wider net. The other one is pretty much you are like, one is casting wider net to catch fish. The other one is using spare You are standing in the water, you try to use a spear to catch fish, right? So the conversion rate will be slightly different because you are using different tactics.
Absolutely. You're speaking my language. I love this. Let's talk about, what are some of the challenges that companies have when trying to implement account-based strategies?
So in addition to getting a buy-in, in addition to have a plan, from my perspective, the next challenge is processes and tools. And to do any digital marketing nowadays, you really need to have a processes and workflow all set up. I mean, Jen, if you're doing growth marketing, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So I have come to realize a lot of people say, oh yeah, let's do a ABM. Let's do this. It should be pretty easy. I don't know. No, I don't think so. Having a plan, get buying, you got that, the barriers, hurdle, over. And then the next thing is you need to think through in terms of your plan, how can you set up a workflow and process that you can actually implement the ABM marketing flawlessly and also tracking the data and the success metrics. I personally think the biggest challenge a lot of time is setting the processes and workflow, sourcing technology, make sure that it actually work, make sure they all work well together. It usually just takes longer than expected. Even if you are using existing channels, existing workflow, there's sometimes you have to tweak, that workflow a little bit, and that takes time.
Yeah, totally. And I completely agree. Like anytime we've run account-based marketing campaigns, they always take a little longer to get live than you want them to. And creating that repeatable process and efficient process is really hard, especially because in order for account-based marketing, in my opinion, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Like in order for it to be actually worth the time, the content has to be personalized. It's got to be relevant, right? And in order to create personalized and relevant content that one account, not an industry, one account is going to care about, it requires an efficient and repeatable process that is just, it's hard. And it's often teams are resource constrained. But I think that's the most important piece of account-based marketing. If you can't really invest the time to create relevant and personalized content, then maybe an account-based strategy, it's not the right time for an account-based strategy, perhaps. Or maybe it's only focused on a couple of accounts and not a list of 50.
Yeah. So you brought a very good point, and I do agree with you. Content does matter. And if you do ABM, obviously it's account specific. So depending on your tactics, everything you do needs to be specific to that account. I mean, so there's content, which is one puzzle of that whole, ABM marketing implementation. And I also agree with you that you have to look at the content and then you have to think through that how can you customize it. There are many ways to customize the content. Okay, number one is you don't do anything. Take it as is, or I have to share. All right, that can be one approach. I'm not saying it's wrong, but how effective can that be? The other one is you customize based on industry or vertical. So you don't go like such a deeper customization, but you focus on like it's healthcare, right? So you rewrite the opening, you rewrite the ending, you keep the middle the same because it's the same product or whatnot, right? But you tailor that specifically for a vertical. That is easier to scale if you actually tackle, a similar account with that vertical, right? The other one is just like you said, you customize the account specifically, and that is I call it hyper personalization to account. Well, if you only do that, it's like you're placing bets. If it's $10 million on the table that you are going to win, you know what? You are going to customize it.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to make the call in terms of the level of the customization that you want to do. Is that helpful?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think you can even take both of those approaches within the same business, right? By segmenting those target accounts. You might have a top 10
Yeah.
that they're going to get all of your energy and all of your time and that collaboration between sales and marketing and individualized everything, right? This is just for you, Pam. I just created it for you and I want you to know that, right? And
Yeah.
then maybe there's a second tier of accounts that you want to get into. Maybe they're not the top tier, but they fit with your ideal customer. And those you want to scale the content by vertical or something like that. Like there's room for all of those strategies. I found that the account based, very like company specific content performs better than the vertical content, but it's a trade-off of how much
You have to make. Yeah.
that's right. How much time and energy do you put into creating it to access 100 accounts versus one and, measure kind of the impact of those and what you get out of them. One tip I have is actually like continuing to target accounts, even if your content is verticalized. So if you happen to be using a targeted ad strategy or like something like that, like don't target on industry, build your content on industry, but still target the individual accounts. And that's one way that it tends to work a little bit better.
Well said, Jen.
You mentioned tools also. Like, what are some tools and resources that you think are really useful for account-based marketing?
So, Jen, you've been doing ABM. What are some of the tools that you are using?
Yeah, good question. So I like to, I think that LinkedIn is a good one for paid advertising. I think it does give you the ability to target on individual accounts. I have used targeted ad serving platforms in the past, the big three that exist out in the marketplace. And I think those really depend on who your target audience is. There are certain titles and roles that work really well for those platforms. Like if you're targeting marketers or like a really broad role, then those work really well. Some of the more niche industries, maybe they won't work as well. Any tools to personalize content on your website based on visitors, I love. So Clearbit has some like reveal technology that will allow you to see when someone from a particular company is on your website and deliver a custom experience while they're there. So while you're doing things over here to drive traffic to the site, to then personalize the experience on the site, I think ties it up in a neat bow. And also just like your basic, you need to have your CRM, your email, your Zoom info or your Apollo to grab the names and the data that you need. That's I think a pretty well-rounded stack when thinking about account-based marketing for me. How about you?
I think those are great recommendations, and thank you for sharing, your tips with us, which is excellent. Yay! From my perspective, that when you are looking at what are the tools, and I work with many marketers, and when we talk about ABMs, they immediately go to how to. So what tool should I use? I was like, oh, well, kind of depends. And the lot of paid media effort that you are talking about, and I 100% agree with you, it actually works pretty well, like the LinkedIn Pay. But there are some which is very kind of enterprise platform, specifically for ABM, like demand-based, right? So their platform that you can do pay media, you can do a lot of things, and directly from demand-based platform. Of course, it's kind of expensive. And then when you drive to the landing page, you probably use Path Factory or even any other tools that can actually track in terms of the engagement on the landing page site. And so they are the what tools to use from my perspective has a lot to do what kind of ABM tactics that you are going to use. And also, can you build, kind of workflow in terms of how you want the data to flow? And then you can sit back and look at that workflow, and then you can source, the technology or the MarTech stack accordingly. Does that make sense? So that's how I would do it. And a lot of people use ABM. A lot of people say, oh, I have an ABM platform. I have an ABM platform. I have an ABM collaboration tool. Like, for example, Alyce, ALYCE, they are ABM gifting platform.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if you enter like somebody's name and they can actually crawl like that person's social media profiling or their digital presence, and it will come up like a personalized gift that you can send to, you know, that specific prospect. They call it ABM gifting. It is personalized, you know.
Yeah.
So you have to think through in terms of what kind of ABMs that you want to do, and then you can determine what is the process and also the technology that you want to use.
Yeah, that's a great way to approach it for sure. Figure out what you're trying to actually do, and then do you have the technology to make that work? There definitely was a period of time where anybody who was doing ABM was thinking, I've got to get demand base. I got to get Triblio. Like the ABM is not the technology.
Yeah.
Right. It's just one thing, right?
Like I said, depends on what you want to do.
Totally agree with that. Metadata is another platform to look at, which gives you targeting capabilities outside of LinkedIn on other platforms. So anyways, maybe we'll have to put together a list actually of tech platforms that you could mix and match to create your ABM stack for different reasons.
Yay! Okay.
Amazing. Any other advice for businesses, business owners, marketing teams who want to implement an account-based strategy?
Yeah, just one. No budget, no ABM. If you don't have any budget, or if you cannot allocate your existing budget to do ABM, don't do ABM. I mean, it sounds harsh, but it is the truth. If you want to do ABM without budget, you are setting to fail. And I can make that, mark my words. So make sure that you do have a budget set aside if you want to do it, and you want to do it right? And I have told many of my clients, marketing is not free. Okay, fine, you post on Twitter, you have several tweets, and you post on LinkedIn. Okay, the platform seems to be free, but in reality, they are not free. The time that you're creating content, that's not free. The time you post it is not free. In fact, a lot of social media tools nowadays, if organic posting, they kind of, push that down, more focus on the paid posting, to give the paid content a little bit more exposure. And with all that, you need to think it through. And if you want to do ABM, then do it properly by setting resources and also budget aside to do it, and also working very closely with your sales team. And like I said, we don't have a budget, but we want to do ABM. I was like, then go back and very nicely and communicate with your management. It's not doable.
That's really good advice. And I think it goes back to also how you're tracking your data. If you've got all your data in place, then you can make the argument for why you need budget to focus on these certain things. If you know in and out your customer acquisition costs and all of those things, then you can get that budget that you need to do these tactics and these strategies that are so critical for revenue growth.
Exactly.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. This was so much fun. Such a good discussion. I really appreciate your candid answers. This is a very heavy topic, weighty topic, and I think we accomplished a lot. So thank you so much.
That's the least I can do. I'm sorry I can be harsh sometimes.
No, that's what we need.
Put the realities out there as well.
Absolutely. Well, thanks everybody for joining us and listening in today. I'm going to be back with another episode tomorrow, actually. I'll be speaking with Lisa Merton-Beets of the Content Marketing Institute about their latest AI and content research.